Life is strange where land meets the sea, as what would normally be land animals have adapted to the water, while the sea dwellers have adapted to the open air and solid ground. And so, it is not just that the seashore is a place where worlds collide, but also where they overlap. For a long time, we barely knew anything about the sea except that which we could learn from the coast. Great white sharks got their name from how they appear washed ashore, and many other open ocean creatures were discovered on land centuries before they were seen in their natural habitat. They're most likely brought to the shallows because of grave injuries or illness, which can lead to disorientation, and dying close to the shore means that they'll be brought in by the tides once they stop swimming. Because of the tides, the coast is a place of constant change. The gravity of the moon pulls the sea around as it orbits the earth, which causes the water to rise and fall twice a day. On a rocky shore where water can fall into little inlets and crevices, rock pools remain even when the tide is fully out. Animals can get stranded in rock pools while waiting for the tide to return, as otherwise they might drown in the air or dry out in the sun. But while they act as refuge, they are also dangerous places, often with few places to hide and always nowhere to run. Limpets are snails with a shallow cone-shaped shell. They can survive low tide without a rock pool as they can cling very tightly to rocks with their muscular foot. Sealing themselves in prevents drying out, and their hard shell protects them from most predators, as well as the trampling of a larger animal like a seal or a human. They tend to each have a favourite spot, which they return to by retracing their slimy trail as the tide starts turning. The limpet clings so tightly to its spot that over time the edge of its shell will indent into the rock, leaving a mark called a home scar. Submerged either in a rock pool or when the tide comes in, limpets shuffle around grazing on algae, scraping it off the rocks with a tongue-like organ called a radula, which is covered in tiny teeth. It is very difficult to remove a limpet from a rock when it is fully attached. However, clingfish have specialised teeth that they use to lever under a limpet's shell and twist it from its grip. Limpets also fall prey to starfish, which typically have 5 muscular arms, each with an eye at the tip and a mouth at the centre of its underside. The arms are covered in tube feet, which help the starfish move around, as well as push prey towards its mouth. They are adhesive and can even allow an upturned starfish to set itself right by turning one arm and clinging to a hard surface, then swiveling the rest of its body around it. Some starfish are able to turn their stomachs through their mouths and begin digesting prey before swallowing it. This allows them to break through hard shells like those of limpets. However, the rough keyhole limpet has a unique defensive weapon, a symbiotic relationship with a scale worm, which lives under its shell and can bite an attacking starfish to deter it away. Many fish that live in the littoral zone, meaning right by the shore or in the space between high and low tide, have elongated slime-covered bodies. This allows them to slip easily through tight spaces, especially between rocks, and also provides protection from abrasion. The butterfish is a type of gunnel found on the shores of the Atlantic, both in Europe and North America. Also known as the rock gunnel, it was named butterfish because of its slimy skin, and how easily it can slip out of one's hands when picked up. It searches rock pools for food such as small crustaceans, worms, and fish eggs. It often stays out of the water at low tide, withstanding the air by hiding under rocks and algae, which keeps it from drying out. Staying moist, especially with its coating of slime, allows it to continue breathing, even in the air. And butterfish are not alone in their remarkable ability to survive out of water. The Epaulette shark is far larger, growing to just under a metre long, but similarly searches for food in the littoral zone, and can easily get stranded ashore if it's not careful. Should that happen, it can significantly reduce its demand for oxygen by selectively shutting down certain brain functions. It can lay still like this without breathing properly for well over an hour, sometimes over 2 hours, without being harmed. But it also doesn't have to wait for the tide if it's really desperate. Both the Epaulette shark's pectoral and pelvic fins are broad and muscular, and it can use them as makeshift feet to walk across the land to other rock pools where the oxygen might not be fully depleted yet, or even back to the safety of the sea. In fact, walking is their normal way of moving around, even underwater. Sometimes they venture further out to sea, either to coral reefs or sandy shallows that aren't so close to the land as tidal pools. And even there, where the water is deep enough for them to swim freely, they usually prefer to walk along the bottom rather than swim. Staying close to the seabed is a good way of avoiding most predators, like larger sharks, and the Epaulette itself hunts for crustaceans and worms that often hide under the sand. Epaulette sharks have large black eye spots bordered in white behind their pectoral fins, which are supposedly for deterring predators. These are where they got their name from, somewhat resembling military epaulettes, and easily distinguish them from other sharks in the same family called bamboo sharks, or long-tailed carpet sharks. They have a similar appearance, with broad pectoral and pelvic fins, and of course the long tails. They are also known for walking along the seabed, although the epaulette is most recognised for its tendency to walk on land. Also, like the epaulette, bamboo sharks have two barbels on their snouts, which are electroreceptive organs that can sense nearby animals, helping them to uncover prey from sand and tight spaces. Smaller animals often use venom as a defense against larger ones like the sharks, and the most venomous are often brightly coloured as a warning. There are 4 species of blue-ringed octopus, all of which are very small, highly venomous, and found in the Indo-Pacific shallows from Japan to Australia. The greater blue-ringed octopus, despite its name, only grows to around 10 centimeters across with its arms fully stretched. The greater in its name actually refers to the blue rings themselves, which are larger than the other species. The blue in its rings fades when the octopus is at rest, often appearing a dull brown, still visible against the rest of its skin. When threatened or excited, however, they light up brightly with a brilliant blue lined with black, often flashing repeatedly as a deliberate warning. Like many other octopuses, they primarily hunt crabs, but also prey on other small crustaceans, fish, and mollusks. A lot of sea creatures like stingrays use venom only for defense, but the blue-ringed octopus also uses it to paralyze its prey before eating it. Its beak is strong enough to break through a crab's shell, and its bite can be lethal to humans. However, its natural instinct is to flee from larger animals, and so is likely only a threat to humans if they actively pursue it and try to interact with it. Stonefish are found in similar regions and are also highly venomous, known as being the most venomous fish in the world. But strangely, they do not intimidate with bright colours. Instead, they are extremely well camouflaged among rocks and corals. They are nocturnal ambush predators that snap up any small fish that pass by. The venom, which is injected through spines on its dorsal fin, protects it from predators or large animals that may lay or step on it. Somewhat similar are Weeverfish, a family of small fish that live in the shallows, often burying themselves in the sand and erecting a stinging spine to protect themselves from trampling, although their venom is far less potent. Also, like the stonefish, they use camouflage to ambush passing prey like small shrimps. Weaver stings are not particularly dangerous to humans, although they are described as very painful. Just like gunnels, bamboo sharks, and many other fish of the shoreline, weavers have an elongated shape, which they were supposedly named after, along with their stings, as the word weaver was likely derived from the Old French word for viper. Pipefish are closely related to seahorses, but have the long snake-like bodies typical of the shoreline. Some species have big tail fins which help with swimming, while others are far closer to seahorses in behaviour, swimming upright and propelling themselves slowly with only their dorsal fin. Some even have prehensile tails, which they use to latch onto plants or corals, and also like seahorses, pipefish are known to have long courtship dances before mating, and likewise after, it's the males that carry the unborn offspring. Also related to pipefish and seahorses are sea dragons, which are similar in appearance and behaviour. However, these can more easily camouflage out in the open, their slow swimming being part of the act, strongly resembling a floating piece of seaweed. That being said, camouflage is still their only defense from predators, making dense kelp or seagrass plains the safest place for them. They do not venture into tidal pools like some pipefish do. Blennies are small scaleless fish, with many species having a similar appearance to weeverfish, although generally more brightly coloured. Some species have the ability to change colour, which is used for camouflage, communication, and in some cases reflects the fish's mood. They typically nest in little holes where they are out of the reach of predators. They come out to graze algae off of rocks, but are very territorial and always return to the same hole if they can. Leaping blennies are fish that barely live in water at all. Like the butterfish, they can breathe in the air so long as they remain moist. However, these also try to avoid altogether being fully submerged. They leap out of the way of waves and are far more agile on the land. They are known as amphibious fish because of these traits, although they are technically fish and not classed as true amphibians. However, coastal seas are home to many creatures that do belong to other animal classes, such as reptiles. Sea kraits are snakes that live on the coast and spend much time in the shallows where they hunt for food. They have a flattened tail that acts as a fin for stronger swimming, and can hold their breath for hours at a time. Although they are still tied to the land, nesting, resting, and shedding skin on it, while also needing a source of fresh water to drink from. Unlike kraits, true sea snakes are entirely marine. Most are found in coral reefs and do not visit the land at all. Also, unlike sea kraits and land snakes, they have no ventral scales, which are the smoother underside ones that allow for easy slithering, so a true sea snake will find it difficult to move on land. They still breathe air, although some can absorb a limited amount of oxygen from the water through their skin, which helps them stay underwater for longer. Most sea snakes and kraits are highly venomous, but very passive towards large animals, which is very different to the volatile nature of land snakes. While there are dozens of different species of sea snake, there is only one species of lizard that is known to spend any time in the ocean: the marine iguana. Found in the Galapagos Islands, they eat algae that's exposed on the rocks when the tide is low, or if they are particularly strong swimmers, they can go further out and dive down to graze in the shallows. However, being cold-blooded reptiles, they can barely spend half an hour in the water before needing to return to the shore to warm up again. Luckily, they can hold their breath for the entirety of their dive, meaning they don't waste any time moving to and from the surface while foraging. Sea turtles are another marine reptile that spend much of their time in the open ocean. However, their lives begin on land, and females will return to the same beach where they once hatched to lay their eggs. They dig little burrows with their hind flippers and bury the eggs in the sand to incubate and protect them until they hatch. They do this in massive numbers at the same time, as hatchlings are vulnerable to many predators on land or in the shallows such as seabirds and even mammals like foxes, so they'll have a much greater chance of reaching the safety of the open water if they have safety in numbers. Likewise, seabirds nest on land but can fly miles out to sea to find food. Some even cross oceans, like albatrosses, having large wingspans to allow them to glide on the wind for great distances without expending much energy. The great albatross in particular has the largest wingspan of any bird, typically around 3 meters across from one tip to the other. However, their huge wings can be awkward when not in flight, and combined with their heavy weight, landing and taking off can be difficult, especially when there is little to no wind. As a result, they rarely dive into the water, and instead swoop low to pick off prey from the surface, like cephalopods and fish. Other seabirds, like puffins, have small wings that resemble fins as much as they do wings. They are agile underwater, and actively dive down as deep as 40 meters to go fishing. Unlike most seabirds, puffins do not regurgitate food for their chicks, and instead carry home several fish in their beaks at once. It's a unique ability made possible by its specialized coarse tongue, which can grip easily onto otherwise slippery prey by pressing it against the roof of its beak while still allowing it to make another catch. They build their nests in little nooks on the cliff face and generally return to the same nesting spot each breeding season, as they mate for life. These cliffs can get very noisy and crowded as they share their space with many other seabirds like gannets and guillemots. Gannets are about 3 times the size of puffins, with wingspans that can be well over 1.5 meters across. They nest in gigantic colonies on cliffs, or sometimes covering the entire walkable surface of a small island. They have powerful eyesight, and their fishing strategy is to fly high above the water as much as 30 meters in the air, and then lunge into a dive whereby they quickly snap up unsuspecting fish near the surface. They have several internal air sacs connected to the lungs that can be filled as they breathe in, providing a cushion to soften their landings, but even so, their form has to be impeccable so as to not injure themselves from such dives. They have been known to follow dolphins, as not only will they lead them to food, but also when they work as a team to trap a school of fish against the surface, it makes the gannet's diving strategy far easier and more effective. Their diving is quite the spectacle, and it's fascinating to think that animals like birds, mammals, and reptiles have adapted in such a wide variety of ways to a life in the sea, just as fish have pushed the boundaries of what they can do on land. To be successful in such a quickly and forever changing environment as the coast, many creatures have learnt to master both water and air. And with birds that nest ashore and yet travel for hundreds or sometimes thousands of miles out into the blue, it is clear that the ocean does not exist so far removed from the land as it may seem.